Thanks for joining us today. My name is Shelley Gehring, and I'm part of the Community Assistance Team at MHP. And this is the second session of our three-part series, really focusing on affordable housing trust funds and community preservation at communities, although these are open for anyone. And today we have a session on dispute resolution that I think is going to be really interesting and useful. But first, just to get started, I have some colleagues here from MHP, Emma, Christine, Reneri. There may be others that are joining me here today. We're asking you to put your questions and any comments in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that and bringing those to our speaker throughout the session. We have live caption enabled, so if that would be helpful for you, be sure to turn that um, on your end. And let's jump in. So, for those of you who may not be as familiar with MHP, we are a statewide agency and a nonprofit that is focused on being innovative in the housing space and increasing the supply of affordable housing across the state. We have four key ways that we are doing that. We have the Center for Housing Data that is collecting, analyzing, and sharing a wide variety of data to help inform housing policy on the local, regional, and state level. We have the team that I am a part of, Community Assistance, and we're really out trying to build the local capacity to support affordable housing development, also working with housing authorities and nonprofit developers. We have a lending team that has lent over $1.4 billion to create and preserve affordable housing, specifically rental housing. And we have a home ownership team that's helping to increase access to home ownership for low and moderate income households across the state. Today, we have a special speaker, Kayla Allen, who is the director of the Dispute Resolution Center at Upside 413 in the Berkshire County. And she's going to be presenting us with a session on dispute resolution for municipal boards and staff. I was able to hear her give this training earlier in the year through a session that CHAPA put together. And I really appreciated the insight that she gave about teaching of what conflict is and ways to address it, respond to it when we experience it, particularly in public spaces. But one thing that I really appreciated is that she's also inviting us to look at our own style, our own reaction to conflict. And so those of you who registered you should have received a form to hopefully you spent some time just considering your own conflict style, although we'll give you a few minutes to do that today. But I think that that adds to the conversation because ultimately the only thing we can really control is ourself, and being mindful of our own style can really help us be more effective in the moment. So, Kayla, thanks so much for being with us today. I will stop sharing and you can, bring up your slides. And again, reminder to everyone to please put your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll bring those forward for Kayla to answer as many as we can get to.
Great. Thank you, Shelley, and thank you everyone at MHP. As Shelley mentioned, my name is Kayla Allen. I'm really excited to be here today because I love talking about conflict, which I know sounds weird because not a lot of people like talking about conflict or being in conflict. And just before I get started, I'll share a little bit of how I found myself in this field. I was actually in graduate school for mediation and applied conflict studies in Vermont. I moved back to the Berkshires. I connected with a mediation center that now offers dispute resolution services for any community-based or court-connected dispute. My husband likes to say I have a master's degree in arguing, but I don't know if I agree with that because, and what I hope that you take away from today is that conflict isn't bad. It's all about how we handle conflict. And so, my favorite quote that I love to start with is that conflict is inevitable, combat is optional. So, how can we be hard on the problem and soft on the people? Because conflict is going to happen. It's all on how are we approaching it, how are we handling it, and how are we finding our way through conflicting situations. So, a little bit, if my PowerPoint will load. Okay, so today we are going to talk a little bit about just understanding conflict. And as Shelley mentioned, understanding your own conflict style and how are you showing up to these conversations, to these interactions, which can change depending on who's on the other side. But with that, we will do a small conflict style exercise where you will actually go through a quiz and determine your conflict style for work and your conflict style at home, which could be, again, very different. And then I will leave you with a few tips on how to manage conflict. So, using active listening, working to move from positions to interests, and then a technique we call reframing. And we don't have too much time together today, but I hope again that the takeaway from this is conflict is not a bad thing. Let's figure out how to engage in this space in a productive manner. So, to start, I want to dive into what are some of the drivers of behavior. And so, a lot of the time, when you think of the word conflict, you think of negative words. You think of someone who's maybe really angry, or someone who is acting in a way that you don't agree with. Or maybe when you're in conflict, you're acting in a way that you wouldn't typically at baseline. And this is because when people are angry, that's often rooted in fear, fear of something changing, fear of losing something, or fear of harm. Think about in a personal relationship, if a couple are engaging in a lot of fights, maybe one person is afraid that things have changed or that they're going to lose their connection with the other person. So instead of saying that, it comes out as anger, and then things start to spiral. And so this fear is amplified then by a perceived lack of control over someone's environment or their future. And even if someone on the other side of the conflict thinks that these feelings are unjustified, this is real for people that are experiencing conflict or showing that emotion. And so it's a coping mechanism that's used when people don't feel heard or they feel powerless. And so today we will talk about not necessarily having to agree with what someone is saying, but just hearing them and listening to them and showing them that you are working to understand can really change the way the conversation is happening. And so I was reading, it was interesting. The other night I was reading a book, and in the book, someone had said, people lash out when they're afraid, which is what I'm talking about right now. And the person responded, afraid of you? And they said, no, no, how a person behaves towards us is never about us, it's about them. So, something to think about when you are engaging in difficult conversations. And why does conflict escalate? Why does it feel like sometimes it goes from 0 to 100? And that is because in our world, people have different beliefs about right and wrong, justice and injustice, conflicting values can fuel division. Clashing worldviews make mutual understanding very difficult and sometimes impossible. And then other times, sometimes people are their way of being in relationship with another person or another group or an organization is by being in conflict. And so sometimes there's no other, they don't know of any other way to communicate or work through things. And another thing that I see sometimes is at the end of the day, sometimes individuals don't want to resolve what's happening. They want revenge. They're not coming at it in a, okay, yes, let's get to the other side. And this makes things really, really hard. And so what I usually see, and I deal with conflict like all day, every day, is that a problem emerges, and that's normal, right? Remember, different values, different beliefs, different experiences in the world, and then sides form. And then positions, what people say needs to happen or doesn't need to happen, those positions harden, and then communication breaks down completely. And so following that is that perceptions distort and then a crisis follows. And so I will say too, sometimes when I'm dealing with individuals in conflict, this all of this happens, and people sometimes forget what the original problem was, because so much has happened after that. And so it's really important, if we can at the problem emerging stage, find a way to engage and intervene so that sides and positions aren't forming, so that communication isn't breaking down, and the crisis is not following. So we will talk about in a little bit moving from positions to interests, which helps you get out of this cycle a little bit. So that's how we get into conflict. That's how sometimes where you're like, I don't even know how this happened. Like, that's how it happens. And so, what the way that we are going to navigate through conflict today is first understanding, what do you do when conflict emerges? How are you handling the situation? And so it is 12:14. I am going to give everyone until 12:20 to go through this worksheet. I believe, again, you were sent the worksheet before, and I think it will be dropped in the chat as well. I'm going to give you until, again, 12:20 to complete this worksheet. There will be two columns for work and home. You can choose to just do one right now, or you can do both if you have time. Then the second sheet will have you tally up your total, and then it will tell you which conflict style you generally fall under. And I know it's different with each person that you engage with, but just try to think, more globally, how are you engaging in these situations? Okay, so to keep us on track, if you didn't get through it, that's totally fine. If we have time at the end, we can also take some time for you to complete it, or you can complete it afterwards. It will absolutely be sent in the follow-up, and I know that it just came in another email as well. But let me explain to you the different conflict styles that you will see on that second page once you tally up your results. And this is from the Thomas Kilmann conflict modes. And you can see on the left-hand side, it's focusing on assertiveness. So an individual focusing on their needs, their desired outcomes, and their agenda. And then on the bottom, it's focusing on others' needs and mutual relationships. And so let's start at the top left. You sometimes individuals have a competing conflict style, which is that they are really focused on their needs. They are focused on what their agenda, what they feel is important, and that's the most important thing to them. I will be honest with you. I took this test many years ago before I had children, and then I took it again recently, and I have two children now, and I complete my home conflict style has changed, and I am now in the competing bracket. And I realized that was because there are certain things as a parent that I feel so strongly about. There are certain lessons that I'm like, oh, we need to make sure that this is emphasized. We need to make sure we're doing this. And so with my husband, I'm not collaborating or compromising because I feel so strongly on the things that I believe in as a parent. And that's something I know I need to work on. But just so you know that it can change throughout your life, and it can change in different contexts. There's also on the bottom left an avoidance style. I was avoiding all conflict possible for many, many years, which is crazy because this is again what I do for a profession. But to me, it was just easier to avoid it and to not bring it up. I didn't really want to get into it. I didn't think it was important to raise it, and I just thought like, nope, I'm not even going to go there with things. There is on the top right, collaborating, which is that you're focusing equally on your needs, but others' needs as well. And so this, they say, is like the gold standard of conflict styles, because you're incorporating everyone's views, everyone's interests. You're trying to come up with a win-win outcome. It's not always easy to do this, but this is all encompassing of everyone at the table. On the bottom right, there's accommodating. So sometimes there's such a big focus on other people's needs and relationships that you are going to just, completely give in to whatever it is they say. You want to maintain harmony. I give the example of with my mom, my relationship with her is so important that I just, I let it go. It's the issue at hand most times is not important enough for me to really even take it up with her. I'm just going to, go with whatever it is that she is saying or wanting. And then in the middle is compromising. A lot of people think that when you're navigating through conflict, the best thing is a compromise, right? Let's split the baby. It's somewhere in the middle of we're focusing on our own needs, we're focusing on other people's needs. I think compromising can work. And I think at the same time, there's sometimes as a way to take it a step further and go towards collaborating, where you're really trying to fully satisfy both sides. And the way that is done is by getting to the interests. What is important to everyone? What are their needs? And is there a way that we can get to that point? And I'll talk more in a second about staying in positions and then moving towards interests. And I think with our conflict styles, it's important just to reflect where do you fall on this? How are you engaging in conflict? And is that okay? Are there things that you could change? And again, it depends on the person that you're in conflict with or the people you're in conflict with. And another thing that I just want to highlight too is that different communication styles definitely impact the way that you are navigating through conflict. And so I, um, I sometimes will be in a mediation and there's a lot of yelling happening. And I'm like, when I first started off, I said, oh, yelling is bad. That means that the conflict is bad. That means things are not going well. I need to stop it. And then I had to ask myself, is it harmful or is it just different? And when I say different, I mean different from how I communicate, and different from how I think people should be communicating. And if it's just different, then you have to ask yourself, do I have to get comfortable with this communication style? Is there a way that I can work with this person, even though they have a different style than me? Or is it that it really is harmful and someone is being disrespected? The communication style is preventing progress. There's discomfort all around. There's a strong power imbalance there that is prohibiting people from being empowered to resolve the conflict. And maybe this is a pattern. That's when it's not going to be helpful to engage in a conversation that way. But if someone raises their voice, but they're not saying anything that's actually disrespectful, they're just raising their voice because remember, they're angry because they're fearful of something. How can we find a way to engage in that behavior? And so I really want to emphasize there that communication styles are a couple of things. It's that Thomas Kilmann conflict instrument. Are we avoiding? Are we competing? And what does that look like? And then, like, how are we actually communicating? And when we're communicating with another person, if someone else communicates in a way that we don't like, how are we responding? And are there things that we can just check and be like, well, hold on, actually, this isn't harmful. It's different, and I'm going to find a way to engage in this conflict, even though it's different to me. So, all of these things I want you to think about when you're entering into a conversation with someone. And I will say, uh, when people are angry, it's coming from somewhere, and so we don't want to just completely dismiss it. We want to find a way to engage in it. And that's what we are going to spend our next segment talking about. So keep in mind your style. How are you controlling yourself? How are you handling things? And then different communication styles. How are you approaching those conversations? And I want to start with a funny video talking about how what it really comes down to is simply communicating with people.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on. If you would just.
Don't.
Oop, 1 second. Okay. So I love this video, and I love this video so much because it reminds me a lot of my life when I am even just like venting to, a friend or something, and they immediately try to solve my problem. Sometimes that's not what I want. And then I get even more annoyed and frustrated. And so I think sometimes in our world, we feel like if people are coming to us, it's that they need help solving their problem. And the way we are supposed to help is by telling them what they should do. And when I became a supervisor in my position, I also thought that, people are going to come to me and I have to give them the answers. And I realized I actually don't. I actually don't. I can sit with them and help them understand what's going on for them. What are their interests? What's important to them? Where do they want to go with things? And I can be there to listen to them. And that is so much more powerful than being like, well, why don't you just do this? Because I don't know if you've been in situations like I have, but when I vent to someone and they're like, well, you should just do this, I'm like, obviously, I know that. That's not why I'm talking about this right now. I just need to talk it through. And another way you can come at that too is sometimes I'll say, do you want advice or do you just want me to listen? So that you can really understand what are their expectations for this conversation. And so, what we talk about a lot in the mediation world and just generally talking about conflict resolution is active listening. And this is more than just sitting there and nodding. What we are doing is we are being present. We are putting everything else out of our mind. We're putting our phone down. We are there with a person and we're there to really help them understand what they're feeling. And so at this point, and picture you're talking with someone and they're a little worked up, we don't want to go in with logic or pleading because they're not rationally thinking in that moment. And so, what we are trying to do is validate emotions. And I know a lot of people will balk at this because they're like, no, we shouldn't even go near emotions. But I can guarantee you'll see what is a circling behavior where people keep bringing up the same thing. And that is a clear indicator that they are not feeling heard. So once you name something, they're able to move on from that and move on to the next thing. And so you don't have to be all like therapist like and be like, well, and how is that feeling for you? You can just really name what you're hearing. Wow, even in that video, it sounds like that's really, this is really tough. Yeah, it sounds like you're really discouraged, and that this is really important to you. Yeah. You can find honest agreement. And so you don't want to reinforce the conflict. You can agree, though, where you genuinely can. So, for example, if someone says this new housing development is just going to destroy our neighborhood, you can say, not I agree with you completely or I completely disagree with you. You can say something like, I agree that change can feel disruptive, especially when it affects the character of a neighborhood. You're hearing them, you're understanding really what is driving that statement. And we can reflect their concerns, we can reflect their feelings and their values to help people feel heard. I, the first calls I get from people a lot of the time, they're way up here. And instead of me being like, hold on, I'll, if I just spend 5 minutes listening to them and then showing them that I heard what they said, it's de-escalating the situation. It's very simple. It's very, and I know it also sounds simple, but I challenge you to try it. It is very powerful. One of the biggest things when we are actively listening is we have to genuinely be interested in what someone is saying. And that can be really hard sometimes. I have to get in the mindset of what information don't I have that would help me understand their worldview. And I also have to remind myself when I'm in conflict, I am not at my best. And so that's what I'm going to be seeing on the other side a lot. But the attitudes are, I honestly care about what this person has to say. I am curious about how they see things, and I am willing to withhold judgment now. You can judge all you want later, now, and accept this person's reactions, perceptions, feelings as legitimate. This is their experience right now. And who am I to judge and who am I to convince them otherwise? Going back to emotion, if you are a person that is like, absolutely not, I'm still not touching emotion, there was a study done where individuals were shown images of an angry face and a scared face. And the MRI scans showed increased activity in the amygdala, which is the brain's danger detector, linked to that fight or flight response. When they verbally labeled the emotion, that brain activity actually shifted so that the part of the brain associated with emotional regulation and behavior control, that is now where the focus is. So what does that mean? That means that if someone is emotional, we can validate it by labeling it, and this helps people feel heard and process their emotions. And another thing I would just add is that I think sometimes we get caught in like the typical descriptions of emotion. It's frustrated, upset, angry. I will challenge you to expand your emotional vocabulary. So, can you use other words that will really so accurately reflect how someone is feeling? And then they're like, yes, that's exactly how I'm feeling. Thank you. And then it's easier to engage in a conversation because you're taking away all of the emotion, all of the anger, all of the confusion, and you're able to get to the problem that emerged, right? We remember that from the beginning. You're actually able to get to that now. Validating does not mean that you are agreeing with them. It just means that you're hearing them. When you're handling intense emotions, what not to do? I think there's this thing that I always remind myself, like never in the history of calming down has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down. And so I have to remind myself that of, shutting someone down or telling them to calm down or trying to prove that they're being irrational, that's only going to amp things up. I guarantee it. So we don't want to dismiss or minimize their concerns, even if we do not understand them at all. Remember, we're putting everything aside and we are there with that person. You can have those feelings later, but in the moment, you don't want to have that. There are underlying dynamics in any conflict and any conversation. And so this is a huge thing that I think I've been talking about this since we started this a half hour ago. When there's conflict or really anything going on, individuals will have stated positions, stated opinions, and that's what you see. It's very clear. They are going to tell you what their position is. I'm going to give you a very simple example. Someone says, I want the window shut. That's their position. And the other person says, I want the window open. That is their position. Under the iceberg is everything else. Their actual interests that are driving the position, opinions, experiences, assumptions, biases, values, needs. And so that's not always very clear. And the biggest thing in a conversation we can do is make that clear. Uh, there is a book called Getting to Yes, which is really a fabulous book on all of this. And a big thing is moving from position based thinking to interest based bargaining. So again, the solution people are, and I'm sure in your roles, you have individuals saying all the time, we need this or we don't need this. It's important through active listening. So first you're de-escalating by doing all that listening, naming the emotions, understanding different communication styles and why it's all happening. And then you're trying to understand what is driving that position. This is the why. Why is someone so concerned about this? And this is everything. This is everything. Because from the very basic example of someone wanting a window shut and someone having a window open, you're going to go back and forth forever. You have two options: close the window or open the window. Maybe then you ask questions to try to figure out what's so important. And you can even ask a very simple question of, tell me what's so important about this. And they may say, well, it's really, I want the window closed because it's really loud outside and I'm trying to get my work done. And the other person says, well, I want the window open because it's really stuffy in here. Okay. So now we have more things to work with. Maybe now they're shifting around the room so that it's not as loud, or maybe we're getting, something in the room so that it's not as stuffy. There is a great example of an orange, and there are two people who say, I want this orange. And so someone comes in, the parent comes in, and let's say it's two siblings, and says, okay, you both want the orange. I'm just going to cut it in half. Okay, bada bing, bada boom. That's okay. A compromise sometimes works. But if you take it a step further to that collaborative mindset, maybe the parent starts asking questions of what they need the orange for. A very simple question. But when you're a parent and you're just trying to de-escalate conflict, sometimes you just do something really quickly and you're like, okay, be done with it. But if you really are genuinely listening and trying to understand, maybe one wants to make orange juice. So they just need the inside of the orange, and maybe the other kid needs the peel because they're trying to bake something and they need some orange zest. So now they can actually both get what they fully need without splitting the orange in half. So this is the thought process around moving from positions to interests. And once you do that, you can understand more what is the issue here? What is that problem? What are they in conflict about? And what is everyone looking to resolve? You saw on the iceberg values were also listed here. So I want to touch on that too. Values are really important. We form our identity our entire life through many experiences, and no single person has the same life experience, right? And so values are telling us how the world should be based on our experiences. They're also shaped by our family, friends, school, whatever it is. And so a lot of the times conflict accelerates because a person is telling another person to change their values. And that's asking them to change their sense of reality. And so, a thing from my experience is that a difference in values does not have to cause conflict. Conflict accelerates it when someone is trying to force their value onto another. It has to be this way, not this way. And so, you don't want to negotiate on the basis of values. What you do want to do is listen for what is behind those words. And again, this is all going into their interests again. And acknowledging that there are differences in values. I see it all the time, especially when I'm at dinner with my friends. We see things a lot very differently. So you can say something, it's quite likely that everyone is going to look at things differently from time to time, and that's okay. It'd be weird if everyone felt the same way about everything. And then getting back to, what matters is finding a solution that works for everyone as much as possible. Tell me why this is so important to you. Tell me more about why are you looking to have it this way and not this way. So how are we doing on time? I want to do an example. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep folks, everyone together. I might do a breakout room in a little bit. But I want you to try to start thinking of moving from positions to interests. So there are going to be two statements on the right. I want you to ask yourself, what is this person? What do they really care about? What are they trying to protect, express, or achieve? And so you're trying to understand from the position, what are their interests? And then what are their possible values that are driving their views? And remember, you don't have to agree with a position. You're just trying to understand where a person is coming from. And so let's look at example one. And I am going to encourage folks to either write down in the chat some interests or values that you think may be coming out of this position. You can also raise your hand if you'd like. We are going to look at example number one, and this is a community member saying every time a new housing development is proposed, it is in the least affluent parts of town. Why are just our homes impacted? What are some interests that are driving this position? Home values. Yep. What else? Density, prestige, destruction of natural resources like trees, perception of decreased property value, aesthetics, perceived discrimination, equity, possible changes in diversity, dislike of change. Yep. Fear of change. Absolutely. Lack of privacy. Yes. So instead of just answering a question of why are just our homes impacted with a very legitimate answer, I'm sure, of, okay, this is where we started, this is how we got there, trying to understand why someone is saying this and how do you speak to that? How do you speak to um, how disruptive and challenging the change, the privacy, um, all of that is? There's a power dynamic over who is advocating for more development versus who is perceived to be giving up domination, desire for us to leave. Yes, this is the fear, right? Fear of change, fear of loss, fear of control, like loss of control, all of that. That is what's driving this position. And I guarantee that if you start having a conversation and making someone feel heard about what they're saying and being like, wow, it sounds like, and da da da. So I could say, wow, it's tell me more about this. And then you're getting some of the interests. And, it sounds like there's a big fear of change and a lack of privacy and going through all of these things. And then you can have it opens up the conversation more to really get at why they are upset, why they are mad, why they are fearful, why they are angry. Okay, so let's look at example number two, and this is a board or committee member position. Our housing plan shows a need for more local housing, but people try to block every housing proposal without offering other solutions. What could be an interest and or value here? Need for community support. Yeah. Interest in expanding housing options, housing need, fear of the unknown, desire for involvement. Oh, I gotta show the community what the housing community will add. Information is important. Board committee looks ineffective if nothing done. Could be almost shifting blame for lack of progress onto community versus taking some accountability. Frustration with conflict at meetings. If they fix the neighborhood, I will be priced out. Yeah. So instead of, people try to block every housing proposal without offering solutions. No, they don't. Yes, they do. No, they don't. Yes, they do. It's changing the shape of the conversation. It's talking about all of these things, the conflict that of meetings, the accountability, the board looking like it's ineffective, um, being involved, talking about the fear of the unknown, talking about the need for community support. And then you have so much more to work with than just staying in a position and like combating that position. So this right here is just moving from positions to interests and understanding how to move from positions to interests. And I'm going to shift gears momentarily and we are going to practice how to integrate that into conversations, that shifting of positions to interests. But something that I want you to think about every time is how can I be looking at this through my interest goggles instead of position goggles? Why is someone saying this? What is driving that position? And now we're going to talk about what to do with that. And this is my favorite thing. It's called reframing. It's very different than reflecting. Reflecting is something that we do a lot in our life. Someone says something and we reflect back what we heard. Reframing is very different. And so, the reason that I wanted to talk about reframing today is that when you are sitting in the positions that you're sitting in, the public may express concerns in emotionally charged, accusatory, or distrustful ways. And so, what reframing will allow you to do is honor that concern, right? We're not just minimizing the concern without amplifying conflict, hopefully reducing defensiveness. And recentering shared goals. Everyone is in whatever space you're in because they genuinely care and they want to work through it, and the reduction of defensiveness is happening through active listening and really making sure people feel heard. Um, we are trying to build trust and moving then from blame to actionable collaboration. So reframing is this. Framing is how we refer to the way someone describes either a conflicting situation, a goal, a concern, an interest, or an issue. And as I mentioned before, conflict is often described in a negative manner. Someone isn't saying, "Oh, I'm just so glad we're going through this right now. This is what's happening, but it's wonderful." That's not typically happening. Um, and it's usually accompanied by emotional content. It's very rare that there's no emotion. And even when there's no emotion, that still is an emotion. And so, what we're doing when we're reframing is we are rewording or restating what the person has said in a more constructive manner. And so, um, I always say that when a person says something, there is a nugget in there that I want to hold on to, and that nugget is their interest. But it's usually surrounded by so much other mess that our inclination is to completely dismiss the statement, the whole statement. And instead of that, I want to take that nugget and I want to present it with a different frame that is more conducive to resolution efforts. So let me talk about what I mean by that. When we are reframing, we are taking away finger pointing. Can you tell I'm a mom to a 3-year-old finger painting? Finger pointing, blaming, single solution focus. We talked about positions a little while ago. The position is usually, I want this, and this is how it's going to be solved. And it's a very one-sided solution. And we are going to then use neutral language and describe someone's feelings, their experience, and not the other person's or group or organization's character. And so we are talking, and reframing is very future oriented. We're not talking about the past, we're talking about what they would like to happen. And this is how you move through conflict. This is how you get to the other side. If you sit all day and talk about the past, you aren't going to get anywhere. Yes, you do have to start there. Hey, this is what happened. This has been the experience. And now, okay, how are you going to move on from it? So the way I start these phrases when I'm reframing, and these are really helpful, kind of like starter sentences to write down is, so what you need is this. What's important to you is this. What's helpful, what you're looking for is this. You would like to feel this. And I'll give you some examples in a couple of minutes. And we're turning concerns into solvable problems. So you're changing a list of past wrongs into future goals. So changing the frame. Instead of blame, you did this, you're going to reframe towards a shared concern or an unmet need. Instead of an accusation of past harm and just reflecting that, you are going to move towards future commitment, repair, or accountability. Instead of cynicism or resistance, you're going to flip it to a desire for authenticity and results. Moving from hostility to a passion about the issue or the urgency for change. And a personal attack, you aren't just going to completely dismiss it, but you're going to try to understand what is the concern here. Is it power, trust, fairness, and how can you elevate that instead of just pushing that personal attack or completely dismissing that personal attack? And a thing that I just before I forget, when I was learning about reframing, I was like, yeah, whatever. And I didn't really try to do it in my practice and in my conversations with people until I saw someone else doing it. And I realized how something that's seemingly simple is so impactful. And so I met with this person and they're like, you know what? It takes practice to have a different type of conversation and to communicate in a different way. And they were like, I actually went on Dear Abby, which is now all online, and I would just look at articles of people complaining, and it's very one-sided and it's very single solution focused, and just sit there and just try to reframe what they're saying. And it was phenomenal. I feel like that's when I truly understood how impactful it can be to shift the conversation in this way with this one small skill. And this is obviously reframing is something you're saying that's part of a larger conversation. But what we're trying to do is just change the way the conversation is happening. And so by reflecting what someone's saying and acknowledging concerns and emotions and reframing, we are already engaging in a different type of conversation. So let me give you some examples of a loaded statement and then the reframed version. So the first statement is this developer is only in it for profit. They don't care about our community. You could say, they do care about your community. They're here, they're showing up. Or you could just focus on that person and their experience and their statement and say, it sounds like you want assurance that projects genuinely serve the community and balance financial interests with local needs. Yeah. Okay, what does that look like? Every time we approve a housing project, traffic and noise get worse. So you're concerned about maintaining a safe, livable neighborhood while accommodating new housing. Okay, how can you maintain a safe, livable neighborhood while accommodating new housing? So then you get into the how. You're just rubber stamping whatever the applicant submits. So you want a decision-making process that feels thorough, transparent, and accountable to the community. This process is too complicated. Ordinary residents can't participate or understand it. So you want a process that's clear and accessible so everyone can meaningfully engage. And every time we raise concerns, the board ignores them. Why should we trust you now? So you want a process, right? Future thinking, where concerns are truly acknowledged and acted upon so your trust can be rebuilt. So I'm going to leave this up here for probably 20 more seconds just so you can read the examples yourself because I know I talk very fast. And then I'm going to show you how to put this all together. Okay. So this is how it would flow in a conversation. Someone says, like I just mentioned on the last slide, every time we raise concerns, the board ignores them. Why should we trust you now? So you give your reframe. It sounds like you're looking for a process where concerns are truly acknowledged and acted upon so that your trust can be rebuilt. And then you ask, is that right? Did I get that right? Always assume that you might get it wrong. And I love getting it wrong. It means that they're going to correct me and tell me actually what is important to them and what they really want. And it makes my job a lot easier. So don't be afraid to ask, did I get that right? And then they say, yes. And you say, okay. So acknowledge and maybe talk about a shared value so that you're connecting and building trust with them. That's a fair concern. Feeling ignored can make anyone really hesitant to trust the process. And community voices should be genuinely heard and influence decisions. Yeah, yeah, okay. So then, and now we're going to follow up like with an actionable item and try to get into that part of the conversation. So, what would help you feel confident that your input is being taken seriously this time? So this is just changing the way we are having conversations. We're showing them we're listening. We're showing them we're working to understand. We're showing them that we care. We are not necessarily agreeing with them, about everything that they're saying, but you want to make them feel like that you're both in control of this decision making and problem solving process and that their voices are important and you want to make them feel heard. So then always following up with a great open-ended question of, and I love to, I'll say sensory questions. What does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? Those simple questions give you a lot of information of what someone's actually looking for. Okay, so let's practice this a little, or at least just we're going to do a small discussion in some breakout groups. So there are three comments here, and I don't think we'll get to all three. I think what I'll do is put you in a breakout room for 10 minutes. And so you could just focus on one. If you get to the others, that's okay too. And I'll make sure to put them in the chat before I make the breakout rooms. But I want you to work on a reframe. Reframe the following comments you might hear in your discussions. So the first one is this funding decision is just politics. It's not about what's best for our community. So you go in with, you need this, or you're concerned about this and you're looking for this, right? Those starter um, statements. Second one is you're making decisions that benefit newcomers, not longtime residents. And then third, nothing is improved in our area despite all the promises. So I want you to reframe it and work with your group and think through what are the interests. That's where it always starts. You can't just jump into a reframe. You have to start with what are the interests, what are the values, and then how can I maintain that nugget, but frame it and package it in a more future-oriented way. So you're taking out the blame or negativity, you're naming that core value, concern, or need, and again, moving away from positions. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had some good discussions. I want to share a few more things with you, and then I do want to leave some time for a Q&A. Um, I want to talk. So, what we've been talking about a lot is okay, so if you incorporate reframing and active listening and naming emotions into your practice, like everything is going to be perfect. And that is not the reality. I think it's really helpful and important to engage in conversations in a way that is going to be constructive and conducive to resolution efforts, all these things we're talking about. And there will still be some conversations that you are in where the hostility continues. And so, what do you do when that happens? I always like to say, I pretend I have a magic wand, but we know that I don't. And so you can set boundaries respectfully, which I'm sure this is nothing new to everyone, but I wanted to put this in here. Still going on this acknowledging of emotions and being really transparent in our communication, you can acknowledge the emotion and set limits. So, saying, I really want to keep hearing you, but we do need to speak respectfully. And that this is what respect looks like to me. Or let's keep this safe for everyone. Sometimes things get heated for everybody, and offering a break is a really, really helpful tool just to be like, I don't know about you. I feel like I could use 5 minutes just to, cool off, get a drink of water, and then maybe we can come back to this conversation. Also, if something's happening like in a public meeting, maybe it is suggesting a one-on-one. I know sometimes when I do public forums, there's one person that is very passionate about what they're talking about, and I want to give them the time, but I can't in that setting. And that doesn't mean that I shouldn't at all. So maybe it is taking it to a one-on-one conversation. And you can also say that continued hostility may pause the conversation. Be really honest about like what are your limits, and I think setting those expectations up front is really important so then you can come back to them after and it's not a surprise to anyone. Knowing when to pause. So, if a conversation does become really unsafe or unproductive, you can just name that. I think that when conflict happens and when conversations don't go the way they should, it's because of a lot of things. But something that I think we can all do is just be more transparent and more communicative. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to say this because I don't want to like exacerbate the conflict. I don't want to piss anyone off, but just being really transparent. And so you can say, this is not productive right now. We are going to pause and we can return to this later. I think having a plan, a support person, a follow up process, or a cooling off period is really, really important. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to mention is reality testing. When we talk about asking questions, and when we talked about asking questions, a lot of it was okay, so you're reframing, you're naming what's going on, and then you're following up with a question because you're curious or you want to understand more. That's when questions can be really effective. Additionally, questions that test someone's reality can also be helpful depending on how the conversation is going. And so you can gently test whether someone's perceptions align with reality, or what we're really trying to do is ask open ended questions to help them see the bigger picture without challenging their beliefs directly. We're trying to get them to go to the balcony, I say, and it's seeing everything instead of being so focused in on this specific thing. It's really being able to see everything. And so it helps spell out the risks of avoiding issues rather than pressuring them. So some questions that I have in my toolbox are you satisfied with how things are going right now? Is this working? Those three words I have asked so much when things get really heated, and that has been the turning point in a conversation. Sometimes they say yes, and then it's continuing to escalate, and maybe it is, but oftentimes it's no, it's not. And that's why I'm so frustrated, and that's why I'm so angry. So it's like, okay, so now how are we either going to engage in this conversation differently? How are we going to do things differently? How are we going to find a way forward? You can also ask, what might happen if this keeps going the same way? If it's, one person feeling really strongly about something and another person feeling strongly about something else, how do you think the other person sees the situation? Doing some role reversal, but people have to be in the right space for that. Has something like this happened before? How did it turn out? What is your ideal outcome here? I love saying, like, what in a dream world, how would you like things to be? May not be able to get there, but it's good to see kind of what the goal is. Is there anything that might be getting in the way of seeing this clearly? That could be a touchy question. So you have to make sure that you've built enough trust and they're in the right space to hear it. Similarly, with what would someone you trust say about the situation? And if you were giving advice to someone in your shoes, what would you say? So just these really open-ended questions to reality test and check the situation. There are a couple things in the chat I just want to take a moment to look at. Oh, yeah. So with the breakout discussion, it is so hard just having like 4 words to work from. That is why my recommendation of a Dear Abby scenario is really, really helpful to practice the reframing. But that's a really good point for next time. And I have, maybe I can share this with Shelly after. I have actually a large scenario that I sometimes have folks really go through and identify interests and reframe. So maybe I can share that after as well. And then I think this chat comment was on the last slide of this framework, or just generally assumes that the hostility is coming from people who are engaging with honest and genuine interest. Yeah, a lot of this is assuming that things are being done in good faith, right? And that it makes it tough when that's not happening. So there was another document that we are definitely going to share afterwards, and I'm not sure if it can be put in the chat now, but something I created, and it's meeting tips for before a meeting, during a meeting, and after a meeting. Just another resource for you to have when you are thinking about all of these things and integrating them into your practice. And then finally, before I do open it up for a brief Q&A, I just wanted to mention, not that this will apply to you right now or ever, but just so you know, sometimes there are situations where mediation can be really helpful, whether it's something going on with 2 people that you're working with or a group. And mediation is nice because it brings in a neutral third party. So sometimes it's really hard to engage in conversations where you can't be neutral necessarily. And that can make things really difficult. We do a lot of work where I say, look, I'm not doing anything different from what you're doing. It's just being that truly neutral person can be so life changing for the situation and the conflict at hand. And so mediation can help for anyone: neighbors, friends, family members, tenants and landlords, really anyone who's in conflict and is looking for help resolving it. And although I am just located in tiny Berkshire County, there are 12 mediation centers total across the state of Massachusetts that offer often free or low cost services. And so if you go to the website here, resolutionma.org, you can see where the mediation center in your area is, and you can see them outlined here as well on this graphic. So with that being said, I do want to open it up for any questions, comments, anything you have for me. We have 10 minutes left, so I am here to answer any curiosities you have.
Just want to let people know you can raise your hand or you can throw a question in the chat.
Can you do this presentation for my town? Absolutely. I was saying to Shelly earlier, doing trainings is my favorite part of this job, so absolutely. Melissa.
Hi, sorry, I'm hiding myself. I don't need to. Hi.
Hi.
First of all, this is great. I'm passing it on to our new mayor, who's an incoming mayor in a town with a lot of conflict and a lot of gentrification, a lot of concerns about older people and younger people. And I will say it helped me understand, somehow it snapped into place, ding, that what I've been arguing for as far as housing and what kind of housing actually has to do with affordability, and that has to do with who can live here and who can't live here. And so the people who are arguing for, I will say, trickle down housing are, never mind, it's going to be too complicated. I think encouraging more people like them to live here. And what I want is more people not like them. And that's kind of insulting. So I need to sit with that. But it was a great epiphany. Thank you. This was wonderful.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm glad. I think, that's what's so interesting too, is sometimes even in my own conflicts and the things I feel strongly about, like I know it better than anyone. And sometimes it's just talking through it with someone to help you understand like the angle you want to approach it with. And then it makes you feel better. Like, oh yeah, that is why I feel so strongly about it. And now how am I going to approach this with other people?
It was great. Thank you.
Oh,
Yes,
I'm
I will,
glad.
I will sit with it and then I'm going to change what I do. So thank you.
Great. Oh, thank you, Melissa. Yes, so where are you located in the Berkshires? I'm in Pittsfield. Our center covers all of Berkshire County, but I also do trainings across the state. So I am not limited to obviously doing trainings just for Berkshire County. Um, and I'm really glad. Thank you all for the comments here.
Any other questions for Kayla or specific comments about I'm really appreciating all the positive feedback in the chat, but any other questions?
Christina.
I asked the question, but I don't think you answered.
Oh,
Where is your location in the Berkshires?
I'm in Pittsfield.
Oh, in Pittsfield? What
Yep.
street?
What street? We are on Fenn Street.
Oh, okay. I know the street. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
and her slides are up on the Housing Toolbox. There are links in the chat, and the recording will be up shortly, probably later today or tomorrow.
There is
Right.
a question here. Are there concerns that the reframing can come off as patronizing? So, yes. And I'm really glad you asked this question because when I am engaging in a conversation with folks, when I first meet with them, I'm not jumping into reframing right away. Because you're right. It's like when someone comes in and all of a sudden they know what you need to do and all of that. You have to really build trust with the person that you're talking to and really understand what it is that they need and what their interests are. And so the way I start is, and I think I mentioned this, you start in the past, like what's the experience been? What are the issues? What's going on? You're asking your questions to understand the interests, the values. Reframing is that bridge from past to future, and it's the bridge to problem solving. So it happens later on in the conversation where you have built trust with the parties. And I will say, when I do introduce reframing, I've never had someone come back at me and think that I am being patronizing, but it's because I have waited a little bit to introduce that into the conversation and I've built trust with the parties. And trust does not mean like I am singing your praises, I am agreeing with you. Trust is simply letting them know I hear you and showing them that you hear them, and then now you're like in it together and it can be really effective in that way. So that's my long-winded answer of saying you don't want to do it 2 seconds into a conversation. You want to really understand what's going on and then introduce it.
When we had the breakout rooms, I found that the most effective reframing was definitely including the curiosity, which means asking for more information. What is really actually what you want
Mm-hmm.
to happen, or what you see is not happening? So with that question, you acknowledge that you listen,
Mm-hmm.
that you absolutely.
Absolutely. Question asking can go such a long way. And something I want to say too is that when you are engaging in these conversations, you don't have to be doing all the talking all the time. Someone once said, as a mediator, and this is obviously different, but in a mediation, they used to talk 80% of the time and listen 20%. Now they listen 80% of the time and they talk 20%. So asking really thoughtful questions and then getting all that great information is so big. Melissa, did you raise your hand again, or was that from before? No, okay. Okay.
There's one
There. Oh,
there's
go
one
ahead,
question
Shelley. Thank you.
about yeah, there's one question about when there are board members that may be condescending toward other board members and any advice that you might offer in that kind of a space.
Yeah, that is tough. Because you're essentially, so it goes back to the communication style piece, and that is it harmful or is it just different? And when someone's being condescending, that is harmful. I think that it's tough because I am all about transparency and all about just having a direct conversation and bringing it up. But I think it can be really hard too when you have a newer member and someone that's been there for a while. And so this might sound weird, but my biggest tip, I always say it's so much easier to dislike someone you don't know and to have a hard time engaging and interacting with someone you don't know. Like it's and I'm sure people have done this, but getting to know someone and talking to them more and finding ways to engage can sometimes help with that condescending tone, because sometimes maybe it's they don't trust them or they're new, they think that they don't know what they're talking about, and so it's like building relationship is really important. And you can also, if you want to, find a way to be really direct but gentle. So hard on the problem, soft on the people. Hey, what would be really helpful for me is, if we could have a conversation in this way, let me know what you think. They may hate it. And that's why I always lean back on just getting to know people more and being in relationship with them. But that's a tough dynamic. And I wish I had a better answer.
And the last question, and then we're going to wrap up, is someone
Mm-hmm.
is asking around the idea of requesting a cooling off period.
Mm-hmm.
Can this sometimes be viewed as weakness? And how do you do this in a way that can build trust?
So I I'm not sure which role you're in. So I don't know if I'm going to answer this question appropriately, but I sometimes own that I need the break so that I'm not putting it on anyone else. And so I will say, I really just need a break right now. And these are the reasons why: either like, hey, a lot of information was just exchanged and I really want to wrap my head around it. Or I just need a drink of water before we come back to the table. And so I feel like if you are owning that you need the break, it's likely others do as well. So it's like, why not be the one just to say what
Mm.
everyone else is thinking? And then I think being as transparent as possible. I'm going to request that we cool off, have a cooling off period, however you do it. And this is why. I think when people get into making assumptions and perceptions are distorted, it's because we're not talking enough about why we are making certain decisions. So if you want a break, say exactly why you want the break. I'm doing this and this is why. And I think that also then goes into your second part of building trust. I'm human.
Mm.
I'm sharing exactly what's going on for me right now. I'm not being sneaky. I'm not doing anything with bad intent. This is me right now.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, Kayla, for your time, for your
Thank you.
expertise, for your presentation. It was fantastic. And thanks to everyone in the audience, those of you who stuck around and you participated in the breakout. We really appreciate you being here and trying to learn and grow. I find, and you maybe do too, that um, dispute resolution, building our communication skills, it's a lifelong journey. And the more that we learn and practice, then the better that we hopefully will get. So thank you for coming today. I just wanted to remind you that everything's going to be posted on the Housing Toolbox, and some of it's already there. We do have, if for those of you who are particularly interested in boards and commissions and helping to strengthen your boards and commissions, we do have a 3-part series that we're repeating in March and modifying and bringing new examples to really help strengthen boards and commissions and helping to support affordable housing. Specifically, next week we have our third and final training in this series. We're going to focus on accessory dwelling units and the property tax exemption for affordable housing. So we have Claire from the state, from HLC. We have one of my colleagues at MHP. We're going to be revealing a ADU incentive program. And then we have the town of Egremont in Western Mass that are going to be sharing about their property tax exemption program. So we hope that you'll come next week. And thank you so much for being here.